right, guys, this is Elon from Inside Fighting. And if you know anything about this channel, which I hope you do, it's that I like both self-defense systems and very obscure styles of martial arts. I don't care if they're traditional. And this video is on a style that kind of meshes both in a very fascinating way. This video is on Arakan.
Pow, pow. Inside fighting, yeah. Dangerous martial arts. Pow, pow. Ooh, ah.
Hey everybody, as always, before I get started, I'm just going to give a shout out to my instructionals on InsideFightingStore.com. I just released a new one. It's a single stick 12 Paris video. It also shows some double stick stuff, some empty hand stick stuff, but it really focuses on the single stick solo drill. So it's really great because you can pick it up, you can train it on your own, you don't even need a training partner, and it'll really set you up foundationally for the 12 Paris videos I'm going to release, which are going to be partner based. So if you want to learn 12 Paris, that's probably the best foundational video that I could have made. I'm really proud of it. Super cheap, 20 bucks. Go ahead, get it. Support the channel, InsideFightingStore.com. That's it. That's my pitch. Now, let's talk about Arakan. First of all, the name. Arakan just makes me think of Dune for some reason, which is cool. Has nothing to do with the style. This style is from Myanmar. Now, Arakan is actually which is now named Rakhine State in Myanmar, was Arakan, and there were people who referred to themselves as Arakanese, which again, Arrakis, Dune, that's where it came from. Just hit me. Okay, so that makes total sense. Now, the founder of this style is a guy who moved to Australia, who is from Myanmar originally. His name is Robert. Let me make sure I get it right. Robert Kia. And he has a different pronunciation of his name here. Ni Tun Kia. Hope I didn't butcher that. I apologize to anyone who's Burmese. And, well, you know, that's the best I'm going to get it. So what's interesting about this style is he studied a traditional style, a style that he says that his people studied very often, which is called Taeng. Now, I think this is directly connected to Bando, unless I'm confused. But in my research, they're very similar looking. What's fascinating here is he moved to Australia and he wanted to create a more self-defense modernized system. I like when traditional older styles, especially when they're obscure like this, adapt and develop subsystems that are very modernized because they always have little sneaky, unique things in them that you just won't find in a straightforward self-defense system. Do I necessarily agree with everything? No, because with that traditional stuff, sometimes there's some breaks in movement that I don't necessarily agree with, but you're going to see it's a very cool style. I'm going to share some stuff with you guys. I'm not going to waste your time. So here we go. Let's just look at some of these movements here. Now, what's nice right off the bat is they're training with multiple opponents. They're doing drills with open hands, which I'm a huge advocate of in self-defense. They started off getting up off the ground, a lot of situational drilling, a lot of fast movements. So first, I'm going to say all the positives, and then I'm going to say what I see that's potentially negative here. A lot of pressure, aggressiveness. Okay, now these are all principles, by the way, shout out to Arakan Martial Arts. All their videos are going to be shared in the description below. They all pretty much come from that one place. So let's just look. Now you see freeze frame right here. Look at the structure of his arm. Okay, that is just a random freeze frame. I didn't do this on purpose. One hand is low, the other hand is high. There are openings here in the street, statistically, to get caught in a chaotic situation. My philosophy of self-defense is that you should leave the lowest amount of statistical opportunity to get caught, meaning that you should always have in any self-defense system that we're talking about, not based on traditional martial arts, not based on combat sports, because there's a reason why you'll sacrifice statistically potentially getting knocked out in those situations to hurt the other person. But in self-defense, my philosophy is if you were to freeze frame me in my system when someone's throwing a punch at me, I should always have structure that covers as much of my head as possible. Like I said, these foundational positions for me, if you were to just see here, if I turn to the side, I'm covered. If I'm in front of you, I'm covered. If I turn this way, I'm covered. Maybe I could get caught a little bit here. Maybe I can get caught in some parts, or if I'm here, I'm really covered. And I'm always driving forward, similar to them. But if you look, they rely on a little bit more complex movements because of that influence from a traditional older style that is very cool. It almost reminds me of, just a little break here, of what Milos does to me, Master Milos. I don't know if you've seen my videos with him, but he gives me a lot of forward pressure with fast movements. It's extremely hard to deal with. And let me just bring this back up here so we can look at it. Now, if I make this randomly at almost any frame. Here he's fighting multiple people. He has to keep distance. We can't blame them. But if you look, the power's coming from low to high, right? It's coming from low to high, so which leaves his face open as opposed to hands always being up by the head. Compare this to a Casey fighting method and you'll understand the difference. These guys will generate a lot more whipping force, a lot more power. They're sacrificing a little bit of head covering to generate a lot more devastating long-range power. You look at a style like Casey, you look at how I teach, we have to get in close because we're trying to keep our hands so close to our head to protect the motor. These guys are sacrificing that to cause damage. Now, what I have noticed in my training with Master Milos, which his movements, again, I will say are somewhat similar in some ways to this. He has a little bit of a different tightness to it, but the philosophy is the same. Intense forward pressure is that it's very hard to deal with when it actually comes at you. So in all fairness, this is a philosophy of self-defense that I do respect. I call it a blitz. I teach it also. I teach people how to blitz. I teach it a little different. It's straight for me, and then it comes around, and I have different blitz formulas where you're going to learn 3 ways to blitz, and you're always going to blitz the same way because you don't want to think about it. You just want to know that when the guy's close to me, I decide I'm attacking. I'm going to do a palm strike here, here, and elbow. And I'm just driving forward with as much power as possible because I don't want to be reactive. I want to be active. I do see that they developed that here too. Now let's just look at another one here. We're going to go through a few of their videos. They deal with knives and they offline a lot with knives. Now keep in mind, this is just a drill. This almost, to me, in all fairness, looks like modernized Kempo or modernized Kaju Kembo. It has a very interesting power generation force behind it, way of generating power, which I'll show you right here. I believe this is the one where they're talking about the smack. And you'll see this philosophy seems to kind of bleed into everything they do. It's short whipping power. Bam. Now, all fairness, that would hurt. I'm not necessarily a fan of punching people in street fights unless you're going to go train something like Kyokushin for a very long time and condition your knuckles so that you don't break them. Because the last thing you want in a street fight is a broken hand, then you can't pick up a weapon. God forbid they have a weapon, you can't get any kind of tactile sensitivity to it. It's very bad to break your hand in a street fight. This is not to say you should never punch. You just have to train for punching. And if you don't have a lot of time, self-defense systems are not for people who are training 8 hours a day, every day. Then you want to develop the kind of power and strength that allows you to not risk your hands. Okay, and that's a very important thing about self-defense systems, which I think has to be acknowledged. Self-defense systems, I'll say it again, I've said it a million times, are not for people who want to be combat sports professionals. You don't need to look at this and say, well, show it in the ring. Show me you could beat up John Jones with this. No, this is for people who train 3 to 5 hours a week. Typically, you look at self-defense systems and will not be training their entire lives. Self-defense systems are meant for people who have 6 months now. They want to learn something, and then they might continue to train if you're lucky. But you get students for a very short amount of time on average. It's just the reality of training. And so unless you're trying to create athletes, which self-defense systems are not, you're going to teach them things that are conducive to learning something quickly that teaches them to beat the average person who they may encounter. You're not trying to teach them to beat John Jones. You're not trying to teach them to beat Jorge Masvidal, or whoever that fighter is. So I'm always tired of that argument. It's actually a very dumb argument. They serve different purposes, and they're there for different reasons. What I will say about this system, number one, I love short smacks, short smacking power. You see it in Silat, you see it in Filipino martial arts. So it's no surprise you see it in Myanmar as part of this system, and in Australia, because obviously this bled into Australia. What I will say about open hand smacks, and I think why I favor them beyond just the risk of breaking your hand, a couple of reasons. In my experience, short hand, short range smacks can be far more devastating than short range punches. In other words, if I only have this much range from here to your face, if I'm going to hit you from here to here, this is much more devastating, especially when you're looking at the targets you want to hit, which are the ear. You pop someone's eardrum right from here, and it's happened to me in grappling where just the small grab misses my neck a little bit and gets my ear, and I'm like, my ear is ringing. That wouldn't happen with a fist from here. Okay, this is not as devastating as a really shorthand, quick snap. Now, you look at that on the neck too. When I snap people down and I give them a smack, they get dizzy. So short-range smacks can generate a lot of force. Another reason is, again, like I said, it's safe for your hands, but a very, very, very important reason from a grappler and self-defense standpoint is tactile sensitivity. You'll see this in styles that I'm gaining an appreciation for, which I haven't before, which is styles like Wing Chun, which is they favor a lot of tactile sensitivity, meaning once they get to you, they stick to you and they want to feel your body and feel where you're moving and not create any separation, which is a philosophy I've really appreciated for a long time, so that once our hands are connected, it's very hard for you to punch me. If our hands disengage, now our hands are apart, now this can come in. In other words, if you have my hand, your hand over my hand, and we're moving, so long as my hand is just resting there, it's going to follow. And as you come to punch, I can guide it and control it. But when we disengage, I no longer have control of the incoming attack. I now have to react to whatever is coming at me. I have to block, I have to move, I have to hug my head, all that stuff. I don't know if it was demonstrated properly because I'm trying to do it on a horizontal. But the reality is that when you have contact, you're in a much stronger position to avoid getting hit than when you don't have contact. It's a simple concept. And when your hands are open, you have much better sensitivity for contact than if you were like this, right? Fists inherently make you stiffen up your arm. They tighten up the muscles, and they also don't allow you to rest on the person. So from a grappling perspective, self-defense perspective, there's a lot of benefits to open hand. Let's just look at this right here. And he's showing how they hit different options. Now, earlier I just said I'm not a fan of options, and I'm not. So when we look at this, it's like if he's saying like, oh, you could come here and do this, you could come here and do that, you can come here and do this. A lot of traditional martial arts do that and teach you different target points and all that stuff. The truth is it doesn't matter what your target point is. What matters is that you can perform under stress. What matters is that you just know where you're going to go and you go for it. So these motions for me from a self-defense perspective are slightly more reactive than what I like to see. But again, these guys sacrifice a little bit of that for power generation. So my criticisms don't actually mean anything. They're a preference. My preference is self-protective as much as possible. These guys are a little bit more offensive. So they're willing to sacrifice a little bit of that. I'm always going to drive in protecting myself. These guys are going to react to something and try and damage you and hurt you. But their philosophy of fighting is very good. Look, he's talking about how you have to get your hips low, get good structure, to generate power with your body. Your hands have to be up. He's doing everything right. It's just a slightly different way of doing it than how I would do it. I would say this, the two go very well together. You can be both self-protective and decide when you want to be offensive. So the idea that I wouldn't train this is completely wrong. I actually think there's a lot of cool stuff here. I think that these styles that teach you how to generate a lot of force and shorthand smacks and come in and do this kind of stuff are very good and have their value. Okay, now let's look here. He's talking about, again, close range combat. So guys in your face, you see hands up. Now, again, these are slight differences, and we'll just look at this quick exchange. So let's just look at this exchange and break it down. He's showing the guys coming up to you. You're kind of going to deal with an attacker, right? Now, let's just watch it and then break it down. Okay, and then the guy suddenly decides to swing at him, and he's going to have to react. Now, he tells the guy what to throw. He tells the guy, throw a hook at me, and he reacts to it. And then he shows, you throw the hook, and I right away come in. Okay, let's just break this down because this is coming to the end of the video. And I think this is a perfect example of the differences of how this system sees self-defense and how I see self-defense. Again, not to bash this system. It's a different philosophy. First things first. Here, what do I like that he's doing? I like that his chin is down. His shoulders are not hiked. I don't know what happened there with the video, but let's just look. So let's just look at his structure and how I would do it, how I teach the passive protective stance. This is a variation of what I teach. This is what I would call a passive protective stance. You look non-threatening, but you're self-protective. You will have your hands higher than you normally would. Your chin is lower than it would normally be. So there's some slight differences. So let's just show, this is my passive protective stance. You push me, you get in my face, whatever it is. My hands come look, first thing I do, hike my shoulder. I put my chin down. I make sure I have my base so my feet separate, and then my hands are right by my face. They are not out here. They're right by my face like this. Hey, I don't have a problem. Okay, now this looks weird, right? But if you look, my hands are literally right here. Okay, my shoulder is literally high. Even if my hands were not up, you're not getting to my chin on this side, and you're not getting to my chin on this side no matter what. And I'm kind of turned a little bit. So I'm just here, just protected. Now, they don't need to be touching my face, but they're near my face. This one is typically touching. This one's close. It doesn't have to be here, but it's close, just comfortably. Now, let's just compare that to his structure for what I would call a passive protective stance. And again, I call it a passive protective stance because it looks passive. it's protective, and it's non-threatening. So what do I like that he does? He does have his feet separated. It's hard to see, but he has good base. Now, his chin is down, which I like, but his shoulder is not hiked. He's squared off completely to the person. He doesn't have a slight turn with a shoulder, like a Philly shell. There's a reason why Floyd Mayweather has not been hit hard for most of his career. You have to look at some of these amazing fighters and adopt some of what they do. The Philly shell is a great way to protect your face without having to be reactive. The shoulder becomes a shield. Now, his hands extended, not very, very high, a little bit closer to chest level, meaning that if this guy swings fast, you do still have to have a reaction to get your hand back to your head or into the arm to defend it. Now, let's just look at how they deal with the threat. Okay, now what I do like here also, which I teach is, and this is a subtle thing you wouldn't necessarily notice, his eye line is to the chest, which gives you a view of the hips and the feet. You read movement much better here. A lot of people make the mistake of staring at the person's eyes. He's doing this very well. He's staring right at the chest. Okay, this is a great note. It also, by the way, increases your peripheral vision so you can see around you better. And you can test this out. Get someone to stand beside you, look straight ahead or a little bit high, and lose them in your peripheral vision. Then look straight down, and you're going to see them again in your peripheral vision. This might not seem like it's a big deal, but when you're looking at a high-stress situation, your subconscious mind picks up on what's happening around you much better when you have a lower eye line. Remember, in a high-stress situation, you're not scared of far distance threats, which is what a higher eye line would allow you to do. It allows you to get a very strong long-distance focal point, like as if you're sniping. As you come down, you are opening, you're sacrificing long-distance range for the circumference around you. And in high-stress self-defense situations, that's the right sacrifice to make. So kudos to him. He does that right. Okay. Now let's just look at what I do differently also here. Here, the guy's getting in his face. Look how extended his arms are. This leaves a lot of opening to suddenly get sucker punched, even though he says he'll react to it. Now, he tells the guy what to throw. I'm not a fan of that. That doesn't mean that he does that all the time. But the reason I brought that up is because he's reacting to a specific strike. He's reacting to a hook, which means that this defense is specific to that strike. I don't believe in that. I believe that your defense should be able to deal and protect with almost any strike. It's why I hug the head and drive in. I don't care if you throw a hook here. I don't care if you throw a hook here. I don't care if you punch straight at me. I don't care if you uppercut. I'm closing the gap and I'm hugging my head, or I'm closing the gap and hugging my head. I'm just making sure that the second your body moves in any way, right? The second I see an indication of a strike or an indication of violence, I am driving in and hugging my head. I don't care what the strike is, because in a high-stress street situation, I do not want to be reactive. I do not want to have to figure out what you throw. Again, this is a slight difference, and I think this is because of the traditional influence. You see this a lot more in traditional martial arts, that they teach you to react to specific things as opposed to saying, it doesn't matter what they throw, we're going to do this. And again, when you have someone for just and he keeps range, when you have someone for just a couple of months or even just a couple of years, you want to get them as effective as quickly as possible. And then he drives in, very nice, but he didn't drive in on the first strike. See, he reacts to the first strike and then drives in with the elbow. I also find it very hard to do a block and attack simultaneously at the same time under high stress, which is exactly what he's doing here. He's blocking and throwing the throat strike or eye gouge. Those are precise, complex motor functions. Okay, just a slight difference. Again, this is not criticism, because I would train this to develop certain reactions under stress. And they do teach a nice follow-up. They do have the mentality, again, of heavy blitz afterward, heavy power generation afterward. So it's just a different philosophy of striking. And that's why I'm being so critical, because with self-defense systems specifically, which is something I'm extremely passionate about, I like to break down why people do what they do. I would love to go train with these guys, feel it, because I'm sure these smacks and these hits feel devastating, and then discuss it more. Okay, so let's just look here. Here he kind of, I don't know if we looked at a little bit of this video, but you'll see that here he does do some things that I really like. We didn't look at this one yet. So again, passive protective stance. It's a very nice natural position here. He does not look like an offensive threat. He looks completely, if I were just walking by, I'd say the guy on the left is the aggressor, the guy on the right is the victim. and you want that. Okay, now he's also protecting his ribs. God forbid there's a knife. His hand's ready to explode out. Great philosophy, great technique here. I like this kind of self-defense stuff. He's talking about versus doing that and putting your chin up. So very similar to what I was just saying. Very curled up, very ball-like. He can keep the guy a little bit at range. I like this. And if you look, he's starting to deal with multiple people so that he can deal with both of them and then right away come in. And not sacrifice the position, not sacrifice the structure versus, again, doing that. So very nice. And they do a lot of multiple attacker drills. Now, with multiple attackers, I have come to the agreement with these guys. You have to be highly offensive. You have to hurt people so that other people stay away. There, he just did it. He just did what I'm talking about. See, so, and I remember seeing this earlier when I was analyzing the video. He literally does a rhino here. So they have it, you know, here. And he does it again here. You'll see a high elbow. It's nice. There. So the system has everything I'm talking about. They just seem to train more. And again, I think that's where the interesting, I was talking about like obscure systems, self-defense, why I like them, because the Burmese or Myanmar influence here of Thang clearly, and again, I feel so weird every time I say Thang, but if I'm saying it right, but clearly they have a little bit more of that. And what I will say is Burmese martial arts, you look at Bando, people do say it's influenced by Chinese and Indian martial arts. This looks like it has that influence. It really does. By the way, this strike, one of my favorite strikes. That. Okay, and I'll explain why quickly and then we'll end the video. This, from here, he's talking about this position. It's an extremely powerful strike. You generate your whole body. It's a downward force. It's also hard to see. The other nice thing about it is it's a clearing strike. As this hand hits, even if you block, it clears that hand so that this hand can follow up. So a lot of time what I'll do is I'll do this followed by another strike like they do. This is an extremely, and we did this in Dos Paris back in the day. This was one of my favorite things. We used to do drills. 1, 2, 1, 2, and you clear whatever's hitting you in the process. It's extremely powerful. It's actually a strike that I call, there's bolo strikes in boxing, right? A bolo strike in boxing is a whole different thing. It's like a bolo punch, right? But bolo strikes in Filipino martial arts are machete strikes. I believe that the bolo strikes empty hand or from the movements of a stick are extremely devastating. That's what the empty hand system in Filipino martial arts is based on. There's a lot of similarities here in terms of how they move with these whipping and constant strikes like this. Looks like weapon striking. So they seem to have that. Those are my notes on the system. This was a highly analytical video, a little bit different than how I normally do it. But when it comes to self-defense videos that are really interesting like this style, take it as a compliment to the style because I wouldn't break it down in this kind of depth unless I saw something very valuable here. So hope this was a little nugget for you guys. Lots of info in this one, and like and subscribe. And make sure to go to InsideFightingStore.com. Thanks so much.